Hi, welcome to my workshop. My name is Tomasz and you're watching Casual DIY channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about a router table, how to use it correctly and what not to do to prevent any potential injuries. So check out the video. Now my router table is actually a DIY version, okay? I made it myself. It's built into my table saw, the Evolution Rage 5S. If you want to check out how to build this, I'm going to leave some links to my videos down below in the description of this video. Let me just show you a little bit up close how a router table looks like, what features it has, and more or less what I've got. You can make it yourself, and also you can actually buy the router tables, and they will be very, very similar when it comes to features and how they work and how they look. A router table, as in the name, comes with a nice, flat and large surface. That is especially helpful in some projects where you want to add some features to a small item, small piece of wood, or sometimes long items as well. So this gives you a lot of stability, so it's a lot safer to actually use a router with a router table. On top of that, as you can see in my case, I also got a T-track that gives me the ability to add additional jigs or a feather board, making sure that the piece I'm pushing through my router bit, it's nice and stable. On the back, just over here, I've got my fence. So you can take your piece of timber or any other material and reference that piece against the fence, making sure that the groove, channel or a profile will be in the exact place you want it to be. On top of that, my fence can actually extend left to right. That gives me a larger slot here, which gives me the ability to install a larger bit. As you can see, I also got a hose coming out from the top of my fence. That's my dust extraction solution. That's why we've got that void in there that helps us to get rid of the sawdust from your router table. However, usually that will not be a perfect solution and you will have some dust flying around, so it's important to wear a mask. Let's talk about the most important thing that you need to know and remember when using a router table. It's the feed direction. Now this could be actually quite confusing for the beginners, especially when you already got a handheld one. In this orientation with a handheld router, you will go from left to right on the outer edge of your project, and that's called a push cut. If you were to go the other way, that's a climb cut, which you should be avoiding even with a handheld router. You can do a climb cut in certain scenarios, but it's not recommended in the general practice. However, if you want to find out more about feeding direction with a handheld router, I've got a separate video on that I do suggest you watch. I've got a link for you down below in the description of this video. With a router, you always go against the rotation of the router bit. So handheld like that, the router bit goes clockwise, so you need to push anti-clockwise, so you are pushing against the rotation of the router bit. Now as you are flipping your router upside down, then the direction will be the other way. You still need to go against the rotation of the bit, but in this position it actually is the other way around. That's why on the router table you push your material from right to left. The router bit is actually spinning this way, okay? So as you are pushing your material through the router bit, the router bit will be actually pulling the piece towards your fence, so you get a greater stability. If you were to push the material from left to right on a router table, there's a good chance that the router bit will catch your piece of timber and it will shoot it out like that, and you would lose control over your work. A router table will have its router located underneath the main table, as mine is. Now in my case, I've got my own DIY version of a lift for my router. However, you can buy a ready kit for a router. Here you've got access to actually change the router bit. In some cases, if you only got the spindle and you've got a lift mechanism, it may actually go high enough for you to change the bit from the top of your tabletop. On a router table, you can use both types of router bits, okay? So normal, straight bits like this one with no guided bearings on top or at the bottom, but also the ones that are guided with a bearing, just like this one. With these, your guide will be your fence. However, with the bits that are guided by a bearing, you do not need to have a fence. Okay. However, it's always recommended and it's the best practice to actually use it. And the way you set up your fence with a bearing guided bit is to make sure the bearing is flush with your fence. Okay, so use a straight ruler, make sure it's barely touching the bearing, just like so, and you could lock your fence in place. So let's make a cut. When operating a router table, always make sure to wear some eye protection and hearing protection. And as you can see, we've got a nice profile. One of the cuts that you can make on a router table is to create a channel in a piece of work. And this setup is actually quite good for it and fairly safe if you follow a couple of rules. If the channel you want to create in your piece of work is exactly the same size as your router bit, there's no issues. So how do you do it? You just drop the piece of work on top of the spinning router bit and push it from right to left. Okay, and I'm going to demonstrate that to you right now. And as you can see, we've got a channel cut out. However, sometimes your router bit will not be big enough and you want to have a larger groove. So what do you think to yourself? I'm just going to pull the fence a little bit forward and I can make a second pass. If you're going to do that, if you're going to pull the fence towards the router bit, then the back of the router bit will be making the cut and the front will be in the void itself. If you are pushing from right to left, in this case, you're actually going to be making a climb cut. And there's a very good chance that the piece will be ripped from your hands and it will start flying around your workshop. What you need to do is to push the router table back away from the router bit. So the front of the router bit is engaged in cutting. And then you take your workpiece from right to left. However, you may ask yourself a question where I'm going to pull the fence forward and I'm just going to change the feet direction from left to right. Now, that's a bad idea from two perspectives. First of all, you're changing the feet direction on your router table, which eventually could get quite confusing and you can hurt yourself by doing so. And the second thing is, you don't really want to have anything caught between the fence and the back of your spinning router bit, as that may lead to some serious injuries and issues you really want to avoid. So if you want to enlarge a groove like that, you push the fence away from your router bit and then make a cut from right to left. Okay, so we know about the feet direction from right to left. That's the correct way of doing things. Now it's time for the position of your workpiece as well. Okay, so you always want to cut with the front of your router bit, pushing from right to left. However, for some strange reason, you may think to yourself, well, actually, I just want to take a few millimeters off my workpiece and I'm going to put it between my fence and the back of the spinning router bit. What could go wrong? Now, I'm going to show you in just a second what can go wrong. Never ever try to attempt this type of cut on your router table. Never make a cut where your workpiece is between the table and the back of your router bit. So as you've seen, what you created is a projectile in your workshop that can seriously injure you. But hold on, you may ask yourself a question, well actually the feed direction was incorrect in this case. As we are cutting with the back of our router bit, I actually should be going from left to right, not right to left. So let's have a look at the result in that scenario. and yeah, you are creating a high-speed projectile in your workshop again. Now, armed with that knowledge, I hope I brought you a little bit closer to using a router table safely and efficiently. These are just some basic information that I think everybody should be aware of, especially when you're starting your adventure with a router table and you're not sure how to use it correctly. Now, with the last two examples, I just wanted to show you what could potentially happen if you do it wrong. Now, don't ever try to attempt that in your workshop. I hope this information was useful to you. If it was, drop me that like button down below and consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't done so yet. Now, if you're interested in tools in general, workshop projects, jigs and everything like that, I've got some really cool playlists just for you that should appear on the screen right now. So go have a look, explore, click on those, and maybe a video will pique your interest. So hopefully I will see you on my next video. Take care.